Science
neutral.
is the most, excuse me, I'd like to answer. Science is the most effective way to find out about our reality. Whether or not you think it was Christians only doing it, which is just silly, but whatever, doesn't make it false in any way. What I'm telling you is we're looking to science to say, hey, what is the actual reality of this? And then saying, what is the best for the well-being of people? You're saying that
yeah, science is the best way to find out about material things. So what? Then he just smuggled in philosophy. Then we're going to talk about what to do about it. That's what we want to talk about, philosophy.
I'm telling you is we're looking to science to say, hey, what is the actual reality of this? And then saying, what is the best for the well-being of people? You're saying that, hey, that doesn't matter. I'm going to go back to my authority.
So his secular well-being, subjective, based on his worldview. It's his opinion. He needs an agreement of what well-being is. You know? Hitler thought well-being was exterminating Jews. He carried the same type of philosophy that Mark Reed did. He just had a different perspective on what well-being is. And he thought that well-being was to increase the German race and decrease the Jews. So if he was in an argument with Mark Reed would say, well, I don't like that. That doesn't make me feel good. But I can't really argue with your humanist or secular perspective, Adolf. It's just different from my feelings. But you're not wrong and you're not right, because in my worldview, right and wrong are just ideas that we agree on or don't agree on. And if he's a materialist, well, he's got much more accounting and justifying to do. These ideas themselves. Anyway, it goes much deeper. If he's a materialist, I don't know, so I'll wait for him to speak it, but I'm assuming that he is. If he thinks there's a spiritual or immaterial realm, well, how is he going to connect that to the material realm, right?
Of the church. And what I'm trying to get to is what kind of authority in our society do these priests actually have?
Does science give you prescriptions?
No. That's why you need something else.
Perfect. So you don't go to science to give you morality. Thank you.
Of course not. I go to secular humanism. Science
Of course not. I go to my feelings. I decide what well-being is. I prop that up as an objective ethic, which I've done subjectively, and then I get other people to agree with me. Again, it's the same thing Adolf Hitler did. He just had a different version of Mark Reed's philosophy.
Tells us about the world, right? It just describes the world. So, we might discover and come up with a way to split an atom. Now, science doesn't tell us where, that's hilarious. Look, I got to point that out. That's actually hilarious. It doesn't tell us whether to make a nuclear power plant or a nuclear bomb. Okay, this is where we need more morality. And this is what I'm saying, that we can look to science and say, hey, it describes the world. We can use that for the benefit.
This is where we need more morality. Meaning what? Meaning what? You have an opinion, other people have an opinion. We need to get to the essence of what you're actually saying and the accountability for the claim itself. We need more morality is, again, subjective. The guy that comes up to you and says, I'm a secular humanist and we need less morality. We need to exterminate the bald guys of the world. Well, you can argue with him and go back and forth, but it'll just be your opinion at the end of the day. We want to go deeper than this.
Of human well-being. So if you just say, hey, I'm going to do whatever science discovers, that's probably a really bad idea. But if you say, hey, I want to develop this science and implement it in a way that provides for human well-being, then that is a moral system.
No, they're both moral systems. One of them you just don't like. You prefer the latter one. You have no true moral system because you deny God, deny any objective ethical system. So the guy who has a different opinion than yours, you're just fighting, saying, me no like your opinion, me like me opinion. That's all you have at the end of the day.
Yeah, but in what sense does a Christian ethics system not apply science?
Well, if it contradicts the science, you guys, you know, if it contradicts
secular
science,
humanism
would you
contradicts
believe
science
the
all the time.
patriarchs, or would it, if you patriarchs say, hey, that is something we don't want to do, and there's a long history.
What is wrong with contradicting science in Mark Reed's worldview? Again, subjective ethical system. There's nothing wrong with it. He just doesn't prefer it. He's just going to find people who agree with him. Anything he claims, essentially, is neither right nor wrong. He's just trying to sell you something and say, me like this, do you like this too?
History of this throughout the Christian church.
It's a category error.
His complaints about the Christian church, at whatever level they are, and whatever he thinks is wrong, based on his own system, is just things he doesn't like. He has to appeal to an agreement. He has to pitch his feelings and say, me no like this. Do you also not like this? If you disagree and say, no, I don't care. You're not right. You're not wrong on his system. That's just the way it is for you. This is why he thinks girls can be boys and boys can be girls, because ultimately he has no real ethical foundation other than his feelings. And this is going to get quite repetitive, because I'm hoping that I just popped in at about the 1 hour mark. I'm hoping Alex is going to go into this foundation, into the coherency of his actual worldview.
No. For instance,
I can
the
explain
papacy
why.
Basically taking,
You're not gonna let me.
Telling people in Africa that there's witches, and then that caused a lot of people to be, burnt at the stake, basically. They also told people in Africa that the condoms help spread the AIDS virus. That was a bit of a problem as well. So if the science does conflict with their preconceived religious belief, yeah, they'll drop the science. They've got a vast history
and
of that.
same with you. The science says that life begins at conception, but you're okay with abortion, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, so you go against the science too when it's convenient for you.
No, because that's a matter of personal autonomy, bodily autonomy. So even though somebody
is
breaking
bodily
into
autonomy
my
a
house,
scientific
can I
fact?
talk, or is you just
you
talk
keep
over me?
making
Alex,
these
no,
outright claims that are just nonsense.
Alex, you asked him a question.
Well, I mean, it would be frustrating unless you go for the jugular, because he's just going to keep giving you his opinion in a long-winded answer about a variation of his feelings and why he thinks this way. At the end of the day, so what? You need to continually bring up his worldview and push back with his worldview. If you want to kill babies, that's your prerogative. If you want to save babies, that's your prerogative. And blah, 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 and blah, 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 and so forth and so on. So you can listen to him all day and say, wow, he's really reasonable. But when we get to the crux of the matter, it's the word reasonable. And when you say using logic and reason, the question is, whose reason or whose reasons are you using? The creature's? The autonomous, vain philosophy of the creature? Or are you starting with God, the creator? That's what this is about.
And you have to let him answer it.
Yeah. I know you don't like the answers, but you've got to at least allow me the time to answer. If you've got somebody breaking into your house, that's certainly a life. And if they think that they're going to kill me, I can kill them for sure. They've entered my property. They basically infringed on my rights. That is something I'm allowed to do if I feel like my life is in danger. Now, the same is true of somebody that has somebody that's using their body for a purpose that they don't want it used for. That is bodily autonomy. It doesn't matter whether it's a life or not. It matters whether or not they have the right to preserve their bodily autonomy. So there is nothing unscientific about that. It's a matter of morality.
It's a matter of arbitrary laws created by a group of men that uphold those laws with violent force. He's just appealing to the legal system.
Right. And this is secular humanism. You see your children as parasites.
What do you mean?
That infringing on your personal bodily autonomy because you decided to have sex with somebody.
Is
so you see them as
breaking
parasites.
Into my house? Is someone breaking into my house a parasite?
And no, and neither is a child, by the way.
Well, yeah, then I don't think they're a parasite.
You just said it. You said they were infringing on your bodily autonomy, right?
Yes, they
living
are,
inside your body. Yeah.
Well, unless you consent, sure. That's the whole point. If you consent to it, it's not a problem.
Yeah, as long as you want the child. If you don't want them, fuck them.
As long as you consent to the living being growing in your body as a result of your behavior. Okay.
Anyway,
I didn't say that.
I would like to get back to my second.
Well, it's interesting because you bring up abortion, and I do.
So
have
you
a
can
point
interrupt
to make
me,
about
but
abortion.
I can't interrupt you. That's fine.
Okay. Well, I do want to make a point about this, but go on, Alex.
You can make a point about this because I want to move on to my second hypothetical that I had in my opening.
Okay, well, I'll make a point quickly. It'd be nice if the Christians, instead of, I don't know, lobbying the government to take away women's bodily autonomy and they're, causing them to die out on tables because they can't get, entropic pregnancies taken away. It'd be really nice if they spent all that money like developing, a womb or something, an artificial womb or something like that, but they don't. So why not?
Well, Christians literally foster the most children. They donate the most money to all of these places, but that's a different issue, I guess.
Well, it doesn't answer my question.
Well, what do you mean? You didn't even ask a question.
I did.
You just went on a monologue.
Well, no.
Talked about how you don't like Christians because they want mothers to stop unaliving their own children.
Is that what I said?
It's pretty much what you said. Yeah, they instead of lobbying against women's rights to unalive their own children.
Take it down a notch, Alex. I don't think you're listening to me. Like that summation of what just happened is so far askew from what just actually happened. It's I don't.
Did you?
Well, yeah, Alex may not be listening, but the thing is there's endless opinions about these matters. So Alex needs to step it up here.
What I said.
Go ahead.
What I said was that Christians spend all this money trying to lobby and stop people.
Oh, I see you there in the chat. Mad Spaz, probably some sock account. Naturalism works. Yeah, you can come on in and talk about it if you want to, but I doubt you will. It's going to be in the same vein.
People from having their bodily autonomy, but they put absolutely nothing into developing like an artificial womb that would address the problem. Why not? Why don't they put all of that money into developing something that would address the problem?
One, I don't know the specifics of which research teams and companies think that a artificial womb is even viable, because we can't even make a baby live outside the womb after 20 something weeks. So I don't even know if that's on the table. But secondly, I don't know how I misrepresented what you said. You think it's mother's autonomy. I think it's unaliving their own children. That's why I phrased it that way. So I got that part right. The second part I got right was you said that why don't Christians focus on efforts to help these children? You said it in a different way of an artificial womb. I just said as they do. Most of the places that help these children and these mothers receive funds from Christians. Christians are the people donating to these places. Now, I would like to get to this second hypothetical, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
All right. So, all right. So if, I don't know why I use Trump so much. All right. No, I didn't use it. All right. So if there was, we went over the slavery one. This has to do with eugenics. If the data shows that a certain group based on region, income, or intelligence consistently draws more from public resources than it gives back, and the same group shows higher rates of crime, poverty, and long-term social dependence, and efforts to reverse these trends have failed, if researchers find that forced sterilization dramatically reduces these burdens, less suffering, less poverty, fewer crimes, society flourishes. What in the Humanist Manifesto says that this is immoral?
Autonomy.
Okay, so if it violates anybody's autonomy, even for the sake of human flourishing, we can't do it.
That's correct.
Okay. So even one person. So,
well, I'm just sort of going over, like, if you basically have the dignity of humans and their freedom being upheld, or their autonomy being upheld, you need consent in order to do anything to them. Take their blood, for instance, you need consent to do that. Like, it's kind of wild at the moment that you're saying, hey, what would prevent that? And it's like, well, what would prevent it if your God told you to do it?
Well, hold on. Before you start asking me questions, I want to finish this line of reasoning.
Okay.
If this is perfect, Mark, you said if you're infringing on somebody's autonomy, then no matter what, even if it's beneficial to society, you can't do it, right?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. If somebody breaks into my house and I infringe on their autonomy, then yeah, that's totally fine.
Why? Because it promotes your flourishing?
Because they're violating my rights, yes.
Okay, so what if these people are violating the rights of society by not allowing them to flourish in the way that they could?
What are the rights of society?
Yeah, what are the rights of society from a materialist perspective? They're a social construct, so they don't exist in reality, but you want to keep claiming you have them. This is a good setup by Alex here, because he's pointing out that this generalization of well-being and autonomy, you can create situations where you are violating it. So this is a good example it's bringing forth. He's showing that Mark is being hypocritical when the situation is not working for his flourishing. Then he gets to violate others, which goes against his subjective, created, autonomous philosophy.
Well, to flourish as a society.
Is
everybody
that a
has the right to pursue happiness, the right to flourish. So
I'm not familiar with this. It feels like now that you're making a straw man.
If you want to go down this route, we definitely can. You said that secular humanism has nothing to do with supernatural.
Down this route.
You just went down here with rights. If you want to say that secular humanism is without supernaturalism, explain human rights. Where are they in nature?
Good. Exactly what I just said a second ago. A social construct. So he's going to try to use metaphysics here from a, naturalist framework. And he can't give an account for something like that.
Here, with rights. If you want to say that secular humanism is without supernaturalism, explain human rights. Where are they in nature, and where can I find them?
Yeah, so this is explained a lot in The Social Contract by John Rawls. We basically have...
Oh, John Rawls decided this in his Social Contract essay. Cool, dude. No, this is not going to solve the issue that he's bringing forward. Mad Spaz, seems the link is broken. Well, I've never gotten that one before. You know, what are you talking about? The link is broken? Here. Click the link. It's not broken. It's just, I've never heard that one. If you don't want to come in, that's fine. It's no big deal. I don't know who you are. Well, I don't know. If it just takes you to Streamlabs front page, do you maybe need to set up Streamlabs? Have you come on other streams before? Is this first time for you? Have you come on a stream before and talk before today? Oh, okay. See you now. Let's go. Oh. Okay, welcome. How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
A little low, maybe. I'll see if I can turn you up. Let's see.
Is that better?
Yeah. So you want to talk about naturalism, right? Like, I think that's the same thing that Mark Reed on the screen was talking about, a natural framework.
No, honestly, I just saw the title. I saw, Deism and Materialism don't work. And my first thought was, well, naturalism does.
Naturalism. So everything arises from a physical reality. Yeah. Yeah. What do you do with transcendental categories like meaning and value, purpose?
I guess I don't of them as transcendental. I think of them as mental.
What about things like logic and number theory? Do you think those are objective truths? Do you think that logic is subjective and math is subjective?
I think that those are probably transgressive, right? So lying in the space between subjective and objective, wherein they somewhat refer to an objective structure in reality, but they are not objective in and of themselves.
So you think 2 + 2 may equal 4, or it seems to equal 4?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Like I said, these refer to objective structures. So if you're referring to the objective structure of how like addition works, assuming you're using an Arabic numerical system, then no, 2 + 2 always equals 4. But like math is mainly theoretical. And just because you can imagine, say, the number in, you can imagine different sizes of infinity, that doesn't mean any of those infinities correlate to an actual thing out there.
Where is the number 2 in naturalism?
Exactly. My point exactly.
No, I'm asking you, though, where is it?
Where is the number 2 in naturalism? Okay.
Right.
The number 2 is not an object, so it doesn't have a location. I guess you could say that the idea of number 2 exists in people's minds.
So the number 2 in your mind is the same as the number 2 in my mind?
No, not necessarily. I didn't say that. I mean, it usually is. You tend to agree on these definitions, yeah. But
so
you could
if everything is
a different definition for 2, technically, yeah.
If everything is natural, where is it existing in the natural world? You're saying in your mind.
Yeah.
So like in your mind, go ahead.
Yeah, so I believe that like thoughts, they are, that's a good question. Where are thoughts? I don't believe they have an objective location. Or let me clarify the question. Are you asking where are thoughts, or
No.
where is the number 2?
Well, I started with where is the number 2, and you're going into thoughts, but either way, it's
right, because I think of the number 2 as an idea, not as an object.
So 2 + 2 in your worldview seems to equal 4 as a thought that you're experiencing, a subjective thought process that you're experiencing. It may or may not equal 4. And it's not in space and the number 2 is not in space and time. So this begs the question, where is it in a naturalistic framework?
I'm not sure that's the right question to ask. Where is the number 2? Like,
you're not sure it's the right question because you've never thought of that.
Okay, well, I'm thinking about it right now. So
yes.
So does it even make sense to ask that question? If
yes.
Number 2, if we accept that the number 2 is not an object, has no physical material reality, and so likely does not have a location.
If you accept that, then you're not a naturalist. How does a naturalist account for a non-object in space and time?
Are you saying that consciousness is not plausible?
How does a naturalist accept an object that does not exist in space and time? How do they account for that on a naturalistic framework?
Well, I guess I'm saying that number 2 is not an object.
How does a naturalist account or justify a non-object in the physical world that's not
you're right,
in space or time? How do you account for that from a naturalistic framework? It's the third time I've asked you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. How do you account for a non-object as a naturalist?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, I guess oh, I'm so sorry. I actually am getting a call and have to go. I would love to continue.
That's fine, but that's one reason naturalism doesn't work, but you can come in another time. I appreciate you, man.
No, I appreciate you too. That was a good conversation. Thank you.
Well, that was actually a good conversation. And he seemed like a decent fellow, like he was actually pausing to think about it. He was starting to argue back quickly, but he was also thinking about it, so that's good. But that was a good conversation, and the end was actually just fine, because he's going to be stuck on that, right? The idea of number theory existing from a naturalistic framework. So yeah, you can come back, Mad Spaz. I guess I'll just go back to critiquing this video, even though it's mostly, well, no, Alex was bringing up a decent point. So let's see what's going on here.
The power inherently laying in the hand, explained a lot in The Social Contract by John Rawls. We basically have the power inherently laying in the hands of the people. Essentially, that is where power lays, and there is nothing a dictator can do if all of the people are against him.
The power lays in the hands of a people. So he's also naturalistic. What is this power he speaks of? It's a metaphysical idea that he's trying to smuggle in, and I hope Alex calls him on this.
So essentially what we do is we transfer authority to a government and do not transfer all of our rights. So it is what the...
So he's got rights and transference of power. He's outside of the domain of naturalism, right? He's into these concepts that he thinks exist: power, transference of power, rights. So I think Alex is just nodding, and he's got to go after that, right? He's smuggling these ideas in.
The people decide that the rights are, and we don't transfer that to the government. So essentially it is a function of power that we have rights, because if the government violates it, they break the social contract. If they break the social contract, then that government will not, they have to enforce consent either by force or by consent of the people, like, getting the people's assent to that happening.
Okay. And so rights are a social contract.
Yeah, essentially,
okay.
Yeah.
Which scientific experiment gives us these social contracts?
I'm sorry, what?
Which scientific experiment gives us these social contracts?
Are you talking about sociology, like the things that they've done in sociology?
I'm talking about a empirical scientific experiment that gives us
Alex,
these social
you
contracts.
know that social constructs like money, it's like saying, well, which experiment gives us the value of money? It's a category error, because
yeah. Well, he's purposely bringing in a category error because you're a naturalist. He wants to know where these ideas of value, of rights, of power and transference of power are coming into the conversation, because you're a naturalist. You're smuggling them in. Now, talking about sociology is not going to help you, Mark.
Basically saying, hey, what empirical testing can we do on something that we've socially constructed by agreement between people? So
yeah, it's an agreement, right? That's all he has is agreements. He has subjective ethics trying to get you to agree. But when you stop him and say, how do you account for these things in your worldview? He can't do it. He just keeps talking, right? He just keeps saying, well, we do this in the science we see after the fact, right? He's talking about a posteriori knowledge. We see results in experiments, even larger social experiments over time. But Alex is asking about the a priori knowledge. How do you know these things are the case before you talk about the sciences? How does a naturalist account for meaning, value, purpose, causality? Where do those things exist in the natural world?
So money, for instance, is worth nothing, but we all agree that it's worth something. It's as stupid as asking, what's the scientific experiment on the value of money?
So it's supernatural.
I'm really sorry. Is money supernatural?
So he's saying it's supernatural. In other words, metaphysical is the way I would have termed it. It's above or beyond the natural, but you seem to be bringing it in somehow. And Alex wants an account for it. So I don't know how well he's going to handle this, but that's what he's driving at.
Is it outside the realms of scientific experiment?
Well, yeah, it's imaginary.
Oh, so are imaginary things natural, Mark?
Are imaginary things natural?
I like how he slowed down to say that. Let me think about this.
Like
I
human
don't
rights?
think-
Okay, so human rights are not found within the realm of nature. So what does that have to do with secular humanism, Mark?
I don't understand what you're trying to ask.
You said that secular humanism has nothing to do with the supernatural, and yet human rights are supernatural.
What? What's your definition of supernatural?
Attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature.
The imagination is not beyond scientific understanding, and we understand what the imagination is. Is
Okay,
Super
so where do
Mario?
Oh my gosh. We understand what the imagination is. Locating an idea of the mind doing something and creating the things that are being imagined is what he's getting at. That you imagine that there's rights, you imagine there's power and transference of power. But I don't know if Mark actually doesn't understand him or he's adept at acting like he doesn't understand. But Alex needs to stay there. He needs to stay here with him. This is where he's going to clinch him. Let's see what happens.
No,
Right.
hang on. Is Super Mario Brothers supernatural?
What? No, it is.
Wow. Is Super Mario Brothers supernatural? So wow. He's going to try to play word games, right? Alex needs to talk about metaphysics. That's what is beyond the physical. But he's using the word supernatural, so they need to clear this up.
It literally exists on a computer.
But it's not natural, is it?
Yes, it is. It literally
is
exists.
natural.
I mean, whether or not it exists on
Mario Brothers.
Okay,
Is Super
so where do
Mario?
human rights-
Hang on. Is Super Mario Brothers supernatural?
So he's got to be like, is he really trying to make a point here, or is he trying to obfuscate? That I wonder if he's gone back and reviewed this. Is that just what popped into his head? Let me talk about Super Mario Brothers. That'll get him.
What? No, it literally exists on a computer.
But it's not natural, is it?
Oh, hey, welcome back.
Hi there. Would you like to finish
Hey,
our conversation?
did you want me to call you Mad Spaz or something else?
You can just call me Julio.
Julio?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm JG.
Nice to meet you, JG.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. So we can continue our conversation, or if you're interested in critiquing this, I can pause it if you want to talk. What do you want to do?
No, I was personally interested in finishing our last conversation because that question did stick with me. How does a naturalist account for non-objects? And I was thinking about it, and I think this is my best answer, and I think it's a pretty good one, which is that a naturalist accounts for non-objects by understanding that non-objects are mental constructs that are contingent on physical properties such as the state of the brain.
So if we're talking about the number 2, you have an idea of the number 2 in your physical brain, and I have an idea of the number 2 in my physical brain.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not the same thing, right? Because they're not the same physical material.
No, they can be identical. People can have identical or close to identical thoughts.
But if you're relying on naturalism, saying that the identity of the thing is part of the material, which that is the brain, how are they identical?
Okay. If you're saying that, okay, the what is not identical would be the state of the brain that it's physically contingent on, but what would be identical is the mental construct. So yes,
what is the state?
I am thinking of the number 2. It is not the exact same electrons in the exact same brain as you thinking the number 2 in a different place at a different time, But that doesn't mean we're both not still thinking of the number 2.
Yeah, but you're saying that the identity is within the construct of the material, right?
What do you mean by the identity? Like, I don't.
We're identifying the number 2. I'm thinking of the number 2. You're thinking of the number 2, and you're saying it can be identical, but your criteria for identity is within your own brain, which also you're bringing in states like state of mind or state of the brain. So how do you again, you're bringing in things that are not
just an example. It's contingent on physical properties such as, it could also be contingent on physical properties such as, deeper laws of how the universe works.
Where does a law exist in naturalism?
Where does a law?
These things you're bringing, because I'm stopping you and bringing in things that you're saying I have to stop you each time because you're bringing in metaphysical concepts.
Yeah, but metaphysics is not incompatible with naturalism. Like, I'm not understanding where these questions are coming from.
Because you're smuggling metaphysical ideas into naturalism.
Well, naturalism is not the same thing as like a strict materialist who believes we're all philosophical zombies. You understand that, right? Like, naturalism,
it depends on
and mental constructs.
It depends on who I'm talking to, sure, but if you're saying you're a naturalist, I'm assuming that all arises from the natural world.
Yes.
Okay. So where do laws arise from in the natural world?
Okay. Then we have to modify the statement to be a little more accurate. I would say generally all arises from the natural world. But if we're doing this whole like
generally,
what about the because we're doing this based on,
you're not a naturalist.
The way you are phrasing the statement is causal, cause and effect, which means
where does cause and effect exist?
Cause and first cause. I already see where this conversation's going.
Sure. Where does cause and effect exist in the natural world?
I'm not making the claim that cause and effect even exist.
I'm just brought it in.
The question was called. You did, because you structured your sentence in a causal way. You said,
what is a causal way in the natural world? Where does that exist?
You're saying all arises from the natural world. Or what was the question? You tell me. What was the question?
I mean, it's really anything that you're bringing to the table. You're smuggling in metaphysical ideas, is what I'm pointing out to you.
The question, man. If you're afraid,
there's been a lot of questions. If you're going to bring in causality, which I can
brought it in. That's why I'm asking you to restate. If you could remember what you asked, I don't want to misconstrue you. So I want you to word it.
Yeah. Well, does causality exist in the natural world?
That's a different question. I mean, I can't answer it, but
that's where we are, really. So
sure, let's just pivot. Does causality exist in the natural world? I don't. I do not think that this is relevant to the previous conversation. I think you are deflecting.
I don't mean to deflect, but
the original question, which is, what about naturalism doesn't work? And then that led us to, you can't account for non-objects. And then I gave you a way in which I can account for them. And I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrased this. The next question, I'm trying to remember, man.
Yeah, I understand.
Does causality exist?
Right. So how we were trying to hash out the idea of how do not you brought in non-objects in the last conversation, and I asked you how non-objects are justified, or how do you account for them from a naturalist worldview?
Right. And then I said that non-objects are mental constructs contingent on physical properties such as the state of the brain.
So when you say something like that, there's more things, metaphysical ideas that you're smuggling in to the statement that I'm pointing out to you. That's why you feel like it's pivoting or obfuscating.
Okay, what am I smuggling in?
State of the brain. What is that in a natural world?
That's not a philosophical concept. What are you talking about? State of the brain is a philosophical concept they smuggled in? What?
I'm asking you what that is in the natural world.
What is a state of the brain? You're asking me to
Yes.
define state of the brain? Sure.
Well, I'm asking you to hash it out because you're saying a brain exists, and then when you say something like the state of the brain explains how immaterial things, non-physical objects exist, you've got to be able to put that together. It's saying state of the brain is not putting that together.
Oh, so you think, okay, so we're at the hard problem of consciousness is what's happening right now, is what it seems like. Am I correct or incorrect here?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about consciousness, it's going to be the same type of questioning.
Right.
How
So
you
I
account
guess,
for it from a naturalist framework.
so in that, I would say the way you account for it is through, what's the name of the term? Dual aspect monism. Right. So all of reality is made of one substance. That's the monism. Dual aspect being that physical and non-physical properties emerge from the one substance.
How do you know all of reality is made of one substance? How do you have that knowledge? Now we're in epistemology.
I do not have absolute knowledge of that. That's just what I believe based on the evidence and reason that I have.
So, okay, so if you don't have access to this
absolute
one substance, why are you using it as the foundation of your worldview?
Because I don't have absolute knowledge of whether
that doesn't answer the question. Because you don't have absolute knowledge doesn't answer the question I'm asking you.
What's the question?
This one substance that you're referring to, if you don't know what it is, why are you holding it as the foundation of your worldview of what exists in reality?
Well, okay, so I am not holding it as the foundation of my worldview. I'm saying
one substance is explained.
This is the more so I am not here to make the argument that naturalism is provably 100% true.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you're not here to talk about how it works. You're here to talk about, well, it may work, and here are some ideas.
Yes, I'm not here to arrogantly claim that I have absolute knowledge on fundamental truths of the universe. How is that a problem?
No, that's fine. I'm just saying your original claim was naturalism does work, your first statement before you came in, and now you're saying something else. You're saying it could work. Let me give you some ideas and let me see if they stick.
Okay. I don't see anything. Okay. If you're holding me to the way I worded
that's your original statement on the screen there.
Okay, yes, that is what I said. So let me adjust.
So now you're saying something else. You're saying naturalism could work. Let me see if I can throw some ideas out there and make it stick.
Well, ultimately, I thought the conversation was like, I asked you, how does naturalism not work? And I don't think you've actually proved that. Like you haven't
my line of questioning is
how naturalism does not work.
My line of questioning is drawing it out. I'm asking you questions that you might not have thought of previously, and it sounds like you're honestly trying to think about them, and it's difficult when you get into number theory, like where is the number 2, right? And you brought in non-objects, and I asked you how non-objects exist in the natural world. So they are difficult questions, but I am using things that you've brought into the conversation. And you did say it works. So maybe you got to hash some of those things out. You got to be able to fuse how metaphysical ideas, things beyond the physical, are being brought into the conversation based on a naturalistic framework.
You're right, man. Naturalism is not an answer in the sense that if what you mean by an answer is it explains everything perfectly with 100% proof, if that's what you thought I was trying to do by saying naturalism works, sorry, there was a misunderstanding. That's not what I believe. What I do believe is that naturalism is a better explanation than pretty much all the alternatives. And there are ways that I can explain how, I mean, I think I did just try to explain how non-objects are mental constructs, but that didn't you did not point out the flaw in that, and yet you've already moved past it.
Well, no, I am the flaw will be the question of the how did you term it? The state of mind, the mental.
That's I don't understand this question either. What do you even mean? What
you said that non-objects are justified by.
They are mental constructs.
Mental constructs. So now, what I'm asking you,
but I'm not done.
Yeah.
Let me finish. I want to be very specific and clear so that we don't get hung up on this and keep going over it. Non-objects are mental constructs that are contingent on physical properties, such as, for example, could be something else, but for example, such as the state of the brain. That's the definition I have, or that's the argument.
What I'm saying to you in reference to that claim is mental construct and state of the brain. Those two phrases need to be hashed out, because you're taking something that is physical and you're smuggling in a metaphysical idea.
Okay, but did you not catch the part where I very clearly said, for example, the state of the brain? Replace state of the brain with any other physical property, another physical property.
State of the brain is not a physical property.
You can. I shouldn't have even included it. All right, forget the examples. The sentence ends at the sentence ends at non-objects are mental constructs contingent on physical properties. Period. Right. I don't know why I included that example, because it clearly confused you. The state of the brain is not central to this argument at all.
No, it is in my purview.
What do you mean in your view? It's my argument. I'm telling you that you cannot tell me what my argument is.
No, I'm saying I'm critiquing you and trying to hash out with you how you're bringing in metaphysical ideas into naturalism. So when you say something, I'm focusing on where you're doing that. So you're trying to now remove it from the claim in order to make the claim work.
No. Oh my God. The claim works. Oh my God. I do not understand what is so complicated about this for you. Okay.
It's not complicated. I mean, it's going to be complicated for you to explain these things.
So let me clarify what the argument is and has been since the beginning. All right. The argument is and has been since the beginning. Non-objects are mental constructs contingent on physical properties. Then I decided to give you an example, and you went, that example is the core of the argument, and you need to see it. No, it's not. It's an example separate from the argument.
Yeah. Well, you're changing your answer for one.
No, I've been saying the exact same thing.
Well, you're trying to remove components.
Physical properties, such as the brain. If you remove that, nothing logically changes in the structure of the argument.
You're not saying anything.
What do you mean I'm not saying anything? I'm saying a lot and you're not responding.
I mean, I've been responding with questions and you're changing your answer.
In a way that is objectively non-important and objectively trivial.
You have naturalism accounts for an objective reality, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
So what is objectively true in a naturalistic worldview? Because then we can start we can start working from there. That's why I brought up logic and number theory. I assume that you would tell me that those things are objectively true, but it seems like you won't say that 2 + 2 = 4 is an objective truth.
There are three types of truth. There are objective, subjective, and transgressive. And I believe that things like math fall under transgressive, where there is a discovery of an actual structure that will not and cannot change. And yet at the same time, it's also a framework for us animals to understand that thing.
Where does the framework exist in the natural world?
In our minds. The framework is in our minds.
So this has been this framework that's in your mind has been empirically proven or proven by science?
I just said it's not objective. Like math.
So you're giving me a subjective answer about objective realities?
Can you ask that again?
You're giving me a subjective, an opinion about reality, objective reality. You're saying there's 3 types of truth, and you know that that statement itself is true. How? What is the verification process to bring that statement in about truth that exists in the natural world other than your own imagination?
I genuinely don't understand the question. Are you just asking like how we can trust anything, any thought we have?
You said there's 3 types of truth. Okay, you said there's 3 types of truth: objective, subjective, and transgressive. I'm saying, is that statement itself true? And if so, how do you know? Where does it exist in the natural world? The evidence for that? This is why naturalism doesn't work.
Yeah, if you take 2 seconds to ask a bad question, don't let the person respond, and then
no, you can respond. You can respond, but
naturalism doesn't work. But if you actually had to demonstrate how naturalism doesn't work, then there's nothing, because you haven't done that a single time.
I am demonstrating it in my line of questioning. You can't answer these things from a natural framework. You just keep moving to different concepts, which you can't actually.
How do you know that asking that question? How do you know that asking that question is based on anything true?
I'm basing the question on your claim of what is truth. Subjective, objective, and transgressive. I'm asking if that statement itself is true and how you know from a naturalistic framework. Has it been proven by science?
Okay. I guess it depends on your definition of truth. Let me think it. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. That's fine.
Let me think. Let me try to because I'm trying to understand what you don't understand. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to make this understandable for your worldview. So let me think about how to construct this. There is only one objective reality that is everything, right? It just is everything. This is my
hold on. This is back to the one substance. Is that right?
Yeah, monism.
Right, but I asked you about how you had knowledge of the one substance, and then you gave me some sort of runaround. I went into epistemology with you. Basically, what I'm utilizing is metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, basic philosophy. So when you say there's only one substance, monism, first of all, you're not going to be able to make distinctions with monism. But I'm asking you how you have knowledge of that one substance.
Well, you do make this. You do.
It's in the domain of epistemology, and you've already said you don't know and you can't know everything, which is not really an answer, a direct answer. But you redirected that question already, and now you're back to the one substance.
Yeah, I didn't finish constructing my argument before you attacked the premise, which I think.
Well, I had to go into the one substance again because we lost it earlier, and you're bringing it back in. You never accounted for it. How do you have knowledge of this one substance, and what is it?
So again, we are talking about extremely heady philosophical topics, and do you expect there to be like proof of monism or dualism? Like, do you think most monists or dualists think they have proof of it, or like, I don't understand.
Well, if you're a naturalist, you rely on the material world to give answers. So asking you for some sort of proof within space and time is on the table. If you're going to bring in this one substance, tell me what it is and how you know what it is, and you don't know.
To my understanding, this world seems that there is energy that changes forms, right? What is that? What is the name of the law that energy is never destroyed, only changes forms?
The first law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, first. I couldn't remember if it's first or second. So
Maybe it's the second.
Is it isn't the second entropy? Either way, you know what I'm referencing.
Yeah.
So this law of the universe, that energy cannot be created or destroyed at all. You know, man, I gotta actually do some homework, and fucking I'm actually wasting a lot of time on this shit. Now that I realize it.
No, that's okay. You're a college student?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I've been around a lot longer than you have. So, props to you for coming in and just talking about this stuff on the fly. These are deep philosophical matters.
Yeah, and I appreciate you pushing back. I definitely have to I have to consider just how thorough my answers are for some of these questions. But I do also want to just leave you with, I do think you are, how do I put this? Some of the questions you're asking are epistemically weighty in such a way that you are expecting me to to start explaining the absolute truth of monism, to then explain the absolute truth of I have to prove every single ladder in my naturalistic explanation before we can even talk about what is more probable. And I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to get to the truth. It might be if we're talking about if I claimed that naturalism is absolute truth with no flaws. But that's not the case. And ultimately, I was trying to argue for this is the most plausible out of all metaphysical frameworks. I would love to talk to you again about this someday.
Yeah, sure. Just keep in mind, it depends on where you want to go in philosophy. I'm gathering that you prefer to make agreements and move forward. But what I'm doing is, I'm critiquing you on a level and focusing on the a priori knowledge that you're bringing in. And that's what's key to remember. If you're not familiar with the term a priori and a posteriori, you might want to look those terms up, because I'm focusing.
I understand what you're telling me. I just don't have infinite time to debate it.
Yeah, you can come back. I'm on almost every day, so you can just pop in whenever you want to. Because you're mature enough and nice enough, and it sounds like you want to think about these things and talk about them. So, yeah, come back whenever you want to, man.
Will do, man. I appreciate the conversation. It was nice talking to you.
All right, you too. Take care. Okay, where were we? Oh, Mark Reed was bringing in Super Mario Brothers, right? That's wild.
Okay, so human rights are not found within the realm of nature. So what does that have to do with secular humanism, Mark?
I don't understand what you're trying to ask.
You said that secular humanism has nothing to do with the supernatural, and yet human rights are supernatural.
What? What's your definition of supernatural?
Attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature.
The imagination is not beyond scientific understanding, and we understand what the imagination is. Super Mario? Hang on. Is Super Mario Brothers supernatural?
What? No, it literally exists on a computer.
But it's not natural, is it?
Yes, it is. It literally
is
exists.
Natural.
I mean, whether or not it's natural doesn't take apart from the fact that human rights are not natural, that they're supernatural, and that they have nothing to do with secular humanism. You can't claim to be a secular humanist.
I think you're sort of.
I think that they need to hash out the word supernatural, because when Alex says that human rights are supernatural, Mark goes into this mode of oh, that's funny, that's crazy, but they need to hash out. Alex needs to bring forth that this idea of rights is, you can't just say it's a social construct from a naturalistic framework. You have to go into how that's the case, how that exists from your worldview. And Mark can't do that. So Alex, he definitely needs to stay here. And Mark is pretty good at talking around things and moving around. So we'll see if Alex can stay there and maybe hash out and get around supernatural and stick to the concept of metaphysics.
You're sort of mucking up like supernatural and abstractions, because abstractions we understand because they come from our own minds. You're sort of messing that up completely.
Abstractions coming from your own mind. Well, abstract means to draw from. So when you're talking about abstractions, you're talking about drawing an idea from something that is real. So we talk about logic as an abstract concept, and I'm pretty sure they would both agree on this. But what you want to question Mark on is, well, if it's abstract, what is it drawing from? And if logic is in your mind and created by your mind, well, now you've got logic as a subjective system. So you want to be able to agree, like, is the law of identity, the law of excluded middle, and the law of non-contradiction, are these objective realities, or are they subjective? Are they just created in our mind? If so, now you've got a framework of logic that's variant as opposed to invariant. So that's going to be a problem. I don't think they're going to go there right now, but
it's like if I think of a snuffleupagus right now, then that's supernatural. I don't know how you get to that.
Well, so human rights only exist in our thoughts?
Well, because you can't do a scientific experiment on the snuffleupagus in my head, then it must be supernatural, Alex.
Does the snuffleupagus exist in reality?
Does
I guess the question is
exist?
like, at what point when it's materialized outside of thought? Is that where you're getting to, Alex?
Well,
when like Super Mario Brothers is materialized, right? It's a video game. Right. You can play it. You can touch it. It's got fiber optics and little lights, so it is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess we're going from the thought process of when it's a thought to when it's materialized, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And I guess like social constructs, they're the same. They're materialized in some way. We codified and we've written down the value of money. We have a currency that we put.
Oh, is that right, Mark? So you thought about social constructs in your imagination. Again, what that entails metaphysically on your worldview hasn't been hashed out. But since you came up with something called a right in your imagination and you wrote it down on paper and you got people to agree with it, they now exist in your reality. That's not answering what Alex is trying to ask. So Alex needs to stay here and not get distracted.
Into place. All of this it doesn't make it supernatural. But I really want to.
He's saying it doesn't make it supernatural. Alex is trying to say it's not natural. It's not in the natural world. It's something you make in your imagination and write it down on paper and then apply it to reality. This is not making or giving evidence that the concept that you came up with, wrote down on paper, got people to agree with, is part of the natural world. He's not getting to the concept at hand here.
Go back to, if your God told you to do all of these things, right?
Don't let him reverse the burden, right? Alex, stay with him on this. Even if he tries to go into something else, you got to stay here with him.
What makes it immoral?
Well, morality is based on God's law and his commands. So yes, if God were to tell me these things, of course we would do them, but that would go against his very nature, as prescribed, as he has revealed himself.
Oh, sorry. So where does morality come from in your view? Is morality what God says it is, or is morality found somewhere else and God's relaying it to us?
No, this is the Euthyphro dilemma, which is a false dilemma. Mm-hmm. And you should know this by now, Mark.
Okay, so what's the third option?
Oh, he's saying, okay, is he called him out. He said, you should know this. Well, maybe he's just trying it on, right? The point here is that Alex is coming from an objective ethical system, as God is the necessary precondition of that system. So if he wants to go into ethics, this is actually a worse move for Mark, but he has distracted, or he might have successfully distracted away from him bringing in rights and power and these supernatural or metaphysical ideas that Alex was trying to point out. He might have gotten away from that, but he's moved into ethics now. So we'll see if Alex can navigate the domain of ethics effectively here, because that's not going to be a good move for Mark. I mean, I would say it's not a good move for him, but it depends on his interlocutor, who's Alex.
That it's within God's nature.
Okay, so it comes from somewhere else. So you're saying that that morality follows God's nature. That's where you get your moral command, like preachments from. That's what you do.
Good has an ontology. God is good. Now, evil does not have an ontology. It's a privation of good.
Okay, that's not what I asked. Does your morality follow God's nature?
So the moral laws are based upon God's nature. Now, right. I don't follow the moral laws exactly. I don't know what you're asking.
And does God do things in his nature?
What do you mean, does God do things in his nature?
Well, as far as I know, everything acts according to its nature, right?
I'm not exactly sure what you're saying.
Well,
like, yes, every one of God's acts is in line with his nature. Sure.
Yeah. So when he slaughtered the Amalekites and the Midianites and, ordered genocide committed on them, that must be a moral act because it is in his nature. If he does things in a...
So Alex is he's granting Mark the availability to critique God, right? This creature, and I'm saying creature because there's a distinction here, the creator-creature distinction that needs to be brought up by Alex. This creature, Mark Reed, is questioning God, right? He's saying, oh, God did this, so he's challenging his nature, ultimately, right? God killed these people, therefore God bad, therefore God evil. But Alex has to now go into the creator-creature distinction, right? God is justified. God is not the creature, which this is not going to be something that Mark is going to be receptive to. He's effectively got Alex to move away from the metaphysics that he was smuggling in. He moved to morality, and now he's got Alex on the fence trying to explain God's decisions in the scriptures. And he's going to try to move to say, oh, God bad, God evil, therefore you have a contradiction, right?
In accordance with his nature. Yeah, I'll just explain this for the audience. If he does things in accordance to his nature and slaughtering Midianites is in accordance to his nature, what makes slaughtering of somebody, if you think God commanded you to do it, what makes that immoral?
So first off, it would be moral. And look, there's justification for these things. Do you think that there is no way in which there could be a justification for the slaughter of a people?
Oh, no, give us the justification of genocide. Go for it, Alex.
Okay, let's say there was a group.
Give us the justification for genocide. So it's a loaded response, right? Genocide assumes that there's a wrongdoing. Again, Mark has a subjective ethical framework. So genocide, as I brought up earlier, Adolf Hitler, well, it's justified for Adolf Hitler to say, I think that the world will flourish and will have greater well-being, Mark's term, his secular ethics, if we exterminate the Jews and increase the Germans.
Group of men raping all of your family members. Do you think the slaughter of them would be justified?
Of my family members? No.
Yeah. Oh, you don't. So you would just let them do it. That's awesome.
My family members, because don't forget the justification for the Midianites and Ebionites and all of the other tribes that were slaughtered is that they were...
I think that he received that question wrong and Alex didn't pick up on that, but anyway.
Doing unclean practices and sacrificing their children. Mm-hmm. But don't forget, they killed everybody, including the people that come along. Are you serious?
This is hyperbolic language, and later in the chapters we see that these people weren't.
This is a mistake by Alex to let him critique the Bible. Alex needs to go back to metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics in Mark's worldview. Because the maneuver that Mark is using here is clever, right? He's trying to critique Alex by borrowing from Alex's worldview. Mark can never really say that anybody is doing anything wrong. All he can say is, I don't like that. That makes me feel bad. I want to tell you that it doesn't align with what I call flourishing and well-being, and I want to get you to agree with me. That's all he's doing. So Alex needs to draw him back to where he was. He's getting mixed up here. He's allowing Mark to control the conversation.
Were not all killed. They survived. They were still there.
They kept, in one of the slaughters, they were told by Moses to go back in because he was angry they hadn't slaughtered everybody. And he said, kill everybody, including the animals. I don't know how they could be evil, but apparently so. And another one, they were told to slaughter everybody except for the young girls who had never known a man, and those would be taken back to the tribe of Israel for pretty obvious reasons.
No, not pretty obvious reasons. Why don't you explain to us, Mark, while you butcher the Bible? Go ahead. Give us your interpretation of this. What are the obvious...
Well, it's not a bad move, right, to ask him for his interpretation. But at the same time, if you're going to do that, you need to point out how his worldview doesn't allow for these decisions to be made, that he's questioning the scriptures and the creator in a way that doesn't comport with his worldview. So he has to borrow from the scriptures in order to do this. So let's just see what Alex does here.
Reasons they were taken back for. Why don't you explain to us in the audience?
Well, they were shared out between the tribes.
And where does that
given to the church?
As what?
As what? As slaves.
Slaves for what? What did they do?
What do you mean?
Like, what are you implying here? Flesh it out.
Well, I think that the implication there is because they had never known a man, that was the deciding factor whether a young woman would be killed or not be killed. And so they took all of the women that had not known a man back to their tribe. And I think that the obvious conclusion
it's not obvious.
is they were used as slaves in the household of those that were given them, livestock, essentially.
So what does that imply? All right. So what I'm getting at is a lot of people like to take these verses and imply that they were taken back and used as sex dolls. Is that what you're implying?
I don't think that's necessarily the case in the culture at the time, but certainly they would be married to somebody.
Okay.
So Alex needs to get back on track and stop doing a Bible study with a naturalist, right? The naturalist doesn't like what he reads in the Bible. God's a big meanie, blah, blah, blah. Well, how do you account for these ethical considerations? You have a construct in what you're calling your mind, this brain in motion. You're smuggling in metaphysical ideas to a naturalistic framework, and you come up in your imagination with things that you think are flourishing, things you think are well-being, and then you say, this is my objective ethic. And I'm now going to present this to you and say, this is what I like. Will you agree with me? Will you buy this? That's all he has. So instead of going into a Bible study with him and defending the particular scripture he wants to focus on, he still needs to justify how he's critiquing God from his subjective standpoint by smuggling in metaphysical ideas from a naturalistic framework. So Alex needs to get back on track here.
Possible, and they would not have control over where they lived or who they married, just like because that was the time that they lived in. That was seen as the usual way of doing things.
I'll give you some points because a lot of times when I get into these conversations, when they say that it's obvious what happened to them, I know you watch these debates, you're involved in this. They imply that they're going to be like sex slaves or something, right? But I wouldn't say that they didn't have a choice.
It's because hard. What choice did they have?
Do you don't think that they could have not married somebody?
It literally says they were taken as plunder. They were literally plunder.
And so they were sold into slavery, but that doesn't mean they had to marry somebody.
I'm not sure if you're aware of what being a female slave in that time was like. For instance, there's a passage in the Bible saying that when a man sells his daughter, that he should, if she is not pleasing to the person she's sold to, he should be able to redeem her with, kind of thing. So there's all these passages in there about literally a guy selling his daughter. So that daughter did not get a choice over who she was sold to and who she was married to.
But what does it mean that she was not pleasing to the master?
I don't know. Just if the master...
It means that
Alex is taking the wrong route here. He's allowing Mark to bring in his subjective feelings on the matter to challenge the scriptures. This is the wrong route. I mean, this is just an endless game of back and forth. He needs to go back to Mark giving an account from a naturalistic framework, how any of this is happening, how any of this is making sense, how he can justify all these claims and metaphysical concepts, transcendental categories, causality, meaning, value, and purpose, how they make sense from a naturalistic framework where they exist other than in his mind.
That she wouldn't marry him.
And this is the moral system.
So first off, a lot of this stuff is due to a lack of technology, right? They don't have debt systems. You can't go get a credit card and get yourself out of debt. So you could die on the side of the road and hope somebody would help you, or you could do things that were awful that no man would ever want to do. Just as if I started doing drugs and ended up on the street, there's no way, nothing in me would want to give my kids up, even if that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that moral relativism is a thing, that in certain situations we have to prioritize certain things, and I would agree with that. However, God knew that there was credit cards, and God obviously would have a better system, but didn't. But it really doesn't get to my point of what would prevent a Christian that thought massacring a people and taking their daughters, their unknown to men daughters as plunder would be immoral if you think God tells you to do that, because you said, and you said it quite clearly, that everything in God's nature is moral. So how would that be immoral? It wouldn't be, right?
I want to get this straight. You said God's evil because he didn't give the Israelites credit cards?
I never said that.
Well, you said God knew what credit cards were. So instead of having this slavery system, he could have just gave them credit cards, right?
Well, could he have given them a better system?
This conversation is getting kind of silly. I expected more from Alex, considering that he's a sidekick of Joel Sedekase. Is that his name? Sedekase? He's way off track here. They're talking about credit cards and what God should have done. And, go back to the argument of how a naturalist is accounting for any of this. You're granting him far too much.
He was working with the technology they had at the time. If your argument is God is evil because he didn't upgrade people's technology, that's a bad argument.
If his argument is God is evil, Alex, first of all, the naturalist has to account for evil, what evil is, and he's already given you, and you already know that he's a subjective moralist. So if he wants to be evil, if he wants to say that his moral system is not human flourishing, if he wants to agree with Adolf Hitler, it's all acceptable on secular humanism. You need to go back to that instead of granting him what evil is and trying to defend the Old Testament. Why would you take this route?
Argument. But I mean, this is, I guess
there
it's
was
on
better
topic a little
systems
bit,
around at the time. In the Levant, there were better systems. There were worse systems, but there were better systems.
Like what?
Like, for instance, Romans, women had a lot more rights. He could have taken the women's rights from that. He could have taken from the Greeks certain things about, say, democracy. Well, why should it matter for God what time it is?
Because we're talking about the technology, and you said at the time there was better
isn't
technology.
God timeless?
Oh my God. So because God didn't drop Cybertrucks into the desert.
Oh man, I'm not really appreciating where this conversation is going. I didn't watch this, but I thought it would be a different presentation from Alex here. But I glanced over at the comments there, and hey, what's up, brother Timothy and Vegas Theo? You're using the new Ace Theo picture there. Yeah, what a card that guy is. I saw that you said I'm trying to get a conversation scheduled with this Mark. I know that's an interesting comment. I'd like to know where you got that information from, actually. Well, I'll let you answer that first, and I'll talk a little bit about that if you want. But the conversation is not going to be very eventful, as most of the things I'm talking about are not. Because what these guys are missing and they're used to is being granted things that their worldview can't account for, like Alex is doing right now. You know, when I was just playing for you. Did I say it the other day? I'm trying to remember if I mentioned it or not, but perhaps I did. So I was just wondering, no big deal, because I was over on his channel making comments to him. And he was asking me to debate, and I told him, look, I'll have a discussion with you. It's not going to be really a debate, because I'm asking him to account for his moral system, which is only his opinion. He doesn't seem to quite understand what I'm saying. I mean, I'm going into meta ethics. I'm challenging anything he's saying on the same level. Like, why ought we listen to you? Why ought we consider your relevance? And it doesn't make for a typical conversation, but I find it incredibly relevant, because you get people like Mark who just talk and talk and talk and critique and debate. And when someone comes along and says, you know, you're just running off your opinion ultimately. Like, everything that you say and claim and you think is real is stemming from a mere opinion, a subjective perspective. So you want to get into the objectivity of the worldview, what they think is real. And he's a naturalist, right? So when you focus on the simplicity of traditional philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, which is being, knowing, and behavior, if you stay in those three domains, you get a much different conversation. But what I'm realizing is it's a very relevant conversation for those who are tuned in and want to hear these things. We had a little bit of that interaction with that last man. I think that last kid, I think his name was Julio. He said he was a college student, but he was nice enough, but he didn't expect the conversation to go in that manner, as he expressed at the end. He's like, I can't be expected to answer these deep philosophical questions, but that's the point of these discussions, is I'm not going to just grant you a position or assume that the things you're saying have any weight in reality. I want to know what you think truth is, what you think reality is, but naturalism and materialism is rather easy as long as you get focused in, because they're continually smuggling in ideas that are not part of the natural world, that are not part of the material world. And when you just focus on when they do that, which is almost every sentence that comes out of their mouth, well, it becomes a very different conversation. You have to stop them and say, well, how did you account for that? What is it? What is the state of mind, right? What is meaning? What is value? What is purpose? What is cause and effect? Where is that in the natural world? Difficult things that most people haven't thought about, right? Where is the number two? Like, that's a strange question. It's a relevant question, though. So if you can get to these ideas with a naturalist, they're going to try to talk past them. They're going to try to give you a long-winded answer. But what they're really doing is just trying to get you to buy their answer, which he's doing effectively with Alex, because he's got Alex in a Bible study now, instead of Alex saying, well, wait a second, let me get back to where we were. You're claiming that the things in your mind, your imagination are physical things. They're not supernatural. But they got off on a tangent because of the word supernatural. And it landed Alex in a Bible study with Mark. So I'll give it a little more time and see if he can work back to it. But, as far as hearing a naturalist argue his feelings about the Bible, no offense, but, we've heard this time and time again. It's not relevant to the deeper topics, to the deeper discussion. You don't like God. God's big meanie. You think he's inconsistent. You're not going to get through to someone who's a naturalist and get into the creator-creature distinction. In the book of Job, where the clay is questioning the potter. Like, these things are not going to be relevant. These are for theological students, people who already presuppose God, to hash out these matters. This is not a conversation to be had with a naturalist. But of course, that's where they want to take you, because they get to grant themselves morality and ethics. So I'll play this a little longer and see if it gets out, and maybe I'll just fast forward it. We'll see.
For the Israelites,
no. We're not talking. We're not talking about better technology. We're talking about better systems, better ways of thinking.
Is a system technology?
No, not necessarily. No.
What?
Like, do you think a system of government is technology?
By definition, yes.
So totalitarianism, as opposed to democracy, is technology.
Different technologies. Literally agree.
Oh, I did not agree. It was moral.
So you wouldn't slaughter people graping your family. Are we going to go back over this another time?
No, I wouldn't slaughter people.
Yeah, exactly.
I defend
because
them,
you're a cuck, and you would let people grape your family, is what you're telling everybody.
Wow.
That's not what he said. That's
Alex is. I just fast forward a little, see if they're changing the subject. Alex is not making very good points here. He's just, he's trying to frame it in a way that's favorable to make him look bad, but he's making himself look bad.
And do nothing about it. So there we are.
Christian morality.
You have another
Christian
point,
morality,
Mark,
ladies and gentlemen. Christian morality. This is what it leads to.
That's what he said.
That's fair.
That's called
Mark has another point.
presentism. Yeah, that's presentism, where you're basically applying morality to people in the past who had no idea about that moral system. The problem there is that presentism is moral relativism. It's saying under different circumstances, we would have a different moral code. So in order to use presentism, you have to appeal to moral relativism. That is just how it is. My point is that any of this behavior would be moral as long as... Are we moving
past this? I thought, like...
okay. Move past it.
Let him finish.
I mean, if he's going to finish, and then I'm going to want to say something, and we're going to keep going. We can keep going on it, but you seemed like you wanted to move past this. All right, that's all.
Alex thinks it's moral to slaughter people. I mean,
And Mark is a cuck who would let people grape his family and do nothing about it. So there we are.
Christian morality.
You have another
Christian
point,
morality,
Mark,
ladies and gentlemen.
Well, when Mark says Alex thinks it's okay to slaughter people, he's talking about what the Creator did in part of the Old Testament, which is a different conversation. But again, Mark saying me no like people being slaughtered. Yeah, most people will agree with that. I'll agree with that. The problem is that his worldview and his justification needs to be challenged, because Mark Reed's brother can say, well, I think slaughtering people is what I want to do. All Mark would be doing, arguing with his brother, is saying, no, you got to listen to me, and try to appeal to him emotionally. But structurally or conceptually, there's no real argument. It's just he likes killing people and you don't. Again, Adolf Hitler thought the world would flourish from the rise of Germans and the downfall of Jews. He called that flourishing. He called that well-being in his system for his prerogative. So that's all you have. And that's why you need to stay there. And like I was saying a few moments ago, if I talk to Mark Reed, that's where it's going to stay. And that's why it's going to be somewhat uneventful. But what I hope by doing this is that people are starting to understand that secular humanism and naturalism, talking about ethical systems, is merely an opinion or preference. They try to dress it up through emotional appeals and other factors into something more than what it actually is. And they're getting away with it far too often.
And Christian morality. This is what it leads to: persecution.
You said you had
name
another
calling.
point.
No, it's fine. I think I'm good with your,
Cool.
incredibly moral name calling there.
Well, if you could have answered a question straight instead of gish galloping, we would have been in a different position.
I wasn't the one desperately trying to avoid whether it be moral to slaughter people, and it's horrifying that you think it'd be moral.
I said
to slaughter
yes,
people.
and I was showing you that exactly why you would also, in certain circumstances, agree, but you wouldn't answer a hypothetical straight. So that's why we ended up in this position, Mark.
Well, it's not a straightforward hypothetical.
Well, you literally can't answer hypothetical. Mark, how would you feel this morning if you didn't eat breakfast?
Hungry.
Okay, perfect. You could have just did that, man, but you didn't want to.
Well, I think I still think your hypothetical wasn't really par for the course in this aspect, because it just, I don't know. I think
I could finish my thought on it to wrap it all together, because I couldn't get to it. My whole thought, because it wasn't an analogy. I agree. It's not a one-to-one analogy, and I wasn't making it that way. It was a hypothetical to show that in certain contexts, it's justified to slaughter a group of people. And I would say, if you can imagine a situation where there's justification, the all-knowing, all-powerful God who created everything could have a moral justification for the things he does that we could not grasp. That's very easy to get to, in my opinion.
And I just want to make a point to that it doesn't have to be that God ordered you to do this. All that has to be is that Alex thinks God orders him to do it, and he would do it. And
that's why, he reads the scriptures and he abides by the teachings of Jesus Christ, which is love. So when you get these hypotheticals like, oh, what if God tells you to kill me? Then it's moral. Well, you can ask those types of questions, but if you're a theological student and you study Jesus Christ, it's not going to be justified to say that God told you to slaughter people. So, you can kind of cut that short.
He thinks that's moral.
Completely false and a misrepresentation of my worldview.
Oh, that's what you said.
It's not, but okay.
Yeah, so this is where I point back to, anything can be justified if you think that a God is commanding you to do it.
He's saying the same thing again. Anything can be justified that pops into the imagination of a secular humanist, but it can't be justified. I said that, and then let me reframe that. A secular humanist can take anything in his imagination and say, this is the case. Mark wants to love people. Hitler wants to kill people. They're both, quote, justified in the secular humanist framework. But that's the point of going into the fact that the worldview doesn't have any justification or accountability at this foundation, right? You want to pitch that back to them here. Not in the way of a tu quoque way, where you're doing it too. You want to be able to fluently say, look, there's a creator-creature distinction. The clay doesn't judge the potter. These things you're bringing up for Bible study. Let's go back to your secular humanism, your naturalism, where you think these moral principles, these powers, these rights exist from your imagination because people wrote them down on paper and decided to agree on them. That whatever you think is the case, or whatever you want to call flourishing and well-being, you're saying that you're somehow justified, and the actual opposite of what you're claiming is also justified. So all you have is opinions and agreements that would rise to power. Mob rule, which is what democracy is. Mark has a system of different imaginations trying to say, well, I like this. Let's get together and outnumber the other people who don't like this, and then we will rise to power, and we will create the rights and so forth. This is the system that we essentially live under as well. People who have a better understanding of philosophy and are wiser, they want you to think that all you have is your imagination and a secular system, because they put their own system in place, the ruling class, the governing bodies, and then they set the standard, and they get you to vote for them to put them in place, giving you the illusion that you have power in the vote when you only really have two choices. So the secular system is a master-slave system in the human realm, in the creature's realm. And if you want to get into evidence, just use the last century. Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, the democide, the amount, the millions, the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people that were slaughtered by their own governments. They far outweigh the world wars. This point seems to get overlooked in these conversations.
Good. Anything. It's literally, he's saying, well, you can do all of these things under secular humanism when it specifically opposes it. But the most awful thing.
No, that is true. It doesn't specifically opposes it. Your flavor of secular humanism opposes it. Secular humanism leaves the door open for all and any opinions. He's stuck in his own head.
Things, but don't forget, Alex gets his morality from God's nature. That is within God's nature, therefore it is moral.
And Mark gets his morality from his imagination. That's completely natural and within science.
Right. There you go. That's where you want to go.
His morality from his imagination. That's completely natural and within scientific explanation.
Now, is scientific explanation in my imagination?
No, your imaginary thoughts are just determined by the physical processes in your brain, but we already went over that in a different debate.
Do you think your thoughts are real? Do you think your thoughts are real?
Do I think they exist in a realm that contains a mind? Yes. You don't think you have a mind, apparently.
Why would I not think that?
Because you just said everything's natural. So unless your mind is natural.
Right. What he's saying is he can't account for the idea of mind, of determined material coming to a conclusion of what right and wrong are. He's imagining this to be the case, but he can't account for how that happens and the meaning behind that. He's just applying a meaning to it through the use of emotional language.
The mind? Yes. You don't think you have a mind, apparently.
Why would I not think that?
Because you just said everything's natural. So unless your mind is natural, that's a tough worldview to swallow.
When did I say everything's natural?
Oh, okay. So good. He's not a naturalist now. He's going to get into like the prior conversation I was having with, I think his name is Julio, where he said naturalism works. And then upon questioning him, he said, well, there are immaterial objects. Everything may not be natural. Well, which is it, right? I mean, this is a great place to be. If, again, I guess I'm not sure if Mark is a naturalist or is claiming to be, but either way is fine. Because if he's claiming that there's something beyond the natural, well, guess what? He's now in what Alex would call the supernatural realm. So let's see how he handles this.
I not think that.
Because you just said everything's natural. So unless your mind is natural, that's a tough worldview to swallow.
When did I say everything's natural?
You said your thoughts were natural, which would imply your mind is natural.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so this is what you do, Mark. Like, when did I say that? I didn't agree to that. Well, yeah.
You said everything's natural, not my mind is natural. Okay. Do you not hear what you say?
There are supernatural.
Well, we need to know if he's a naturalist, Alex. Don't get hung up on what he said in this particular conversation. State of the concept. Mark, are you saying that there's more than the material or physical realm? And if so, can you account for this? Or are you saying everything is within the material and physical realm? We need to, Alex needs to hash that out with him.
Natural things?
Mind is natural. Okay. Do you not hear what you say?
There are supernatural things?
I don't know. I don't think so. How can I tell what's supernatural? Can you give me an example of something supernatural?
I don't believe everything is natural. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's wild. Why do you do that?
Do what?
You play on the fence of like, I didn't say that, but then when pressed on it, you're like, well, yeah, that's pretty much what I think.
Yeah, it's because you're straw manning your base.
Okay, so Alex did a fairly good job there of pointing out how he's saying that he's not sure, which is going to be a problem when he's trying to utilize supernatural and metaphysical ideas, because if he's not sure of them, well, then he's in a place where he's going to try to move forward claims and grant himself things that he doesn't know about or can't account for. So that's a good place. But I think he might get tripped up here again.
Basically saying that I said that everything is natural, and I never actually.
So ask him what is not natural in his worldview, right? That's where you want to go right now.
Said that. I said that my thoughts, my brain, my mind is natural. So you're actually misrepresenting.
So where does mind come in? And thoughts? You're saying they're natural as in they're inside of your brain. The gray matter is the thought. The gray matter is the mind, or are they separate? Are you making a distinction of mind and thought? And how are you doing that in a naturalistic framework? So he's lumping together those things as natural. So Alex needs to go there.
Said that my thoughts, my brain, my mind is natural. So you're actually misrepresenting me, while then trying to claim that I've said something else, which is what you've done a lot throughout this debate, actually.
You're quibbling over
the fact
words.
That, well, I mean, I think I've only ever seen
everything you could ever think of.
Please show me something. Can you please?
It's not what he's.
So everything you can ever think of and name is natural, right? That's what follows from what Mark just said. My mind and my thoughts are natural. So when he said snuffleupagus, that means snuffleupagus is natural on some level, right? That's what he's pointing out there.
Actually,
you're quibbling over
the fact
words.
That. Well, I mean, I think I've only ever seen
everything you could ever think of.
Please show me something. Can you please?
It's not what he. It's not what he said, Alex.
No, it is conceptually what he said. Raging Tomato Woman. So this is part of the process, right? Is people say I never said that, but the astute critiquer is saying no, you didn't say those words. You did say multiple things in this conversation. Conceptually, I'm summing it up for you. I'm summarizing that you think when you say the mind and the thoughts and the brain are natural, that means the thoughts of snuffleupagus are also natural. That's what follows from such a claim. Now, if they're going to say, well, I didn't say that exactly and so forth, you just have to sharpen up how you're going to present that or draw them back to the concepts at hand.
I would agree with Mark has been very concise with his points, and I think you are kind of feathering them out a little to make them work with what you want to push in your arguments. And I can agree with Mark on that, that you're doing that, Alex. So I think the whole concept of naturalism is he was comparing the idea of a thought process, right? Just because I think of something doesn't make it necessary, so on and so forth. And that's why I offered the translation of when something materializes, going from is it natural to something that's actually materialized, like a thought, a creativity, imagination, whatever.
If you're going to say that the mind and the thoughts and the brain are natural, first of all, you got to account for mind and thoughts, but you've got to be able to make the distinction of snuffleupagus not existing because you're saying it exists in some sense in what you're calling natural. So you're just making a distinction that you haven't located it in the physical material world, but you're also saying at the same time that snuffleupagus does exist because you thought of it and your thoughts are natural. That's what Alex is trying to say here.
Whatever into materializing it.
I mean, it seems a little dishonest to me when someone says, I didn't say everything is natural, but when I ask them if they think anything is supernatural, they say, no, I can't think of anything.
Right. That's an agnostic approach game, right? Oh, I don't think everything's natural. Okay, well, what isn't natural? I don't know. Well, his actual position, his worldview, the way he's living is as though everything is natural, but he doesn't want to come out and give the claim in the positive because perhaps he knows that's going to be a problem. So he says, I don't know. So then you have to go into the agnostic playbook there and point out that he doesn't live in such a way. And you have to keep with that dichotomy. Like you say, is everything natural or not? For you to say, I don't know. Well, you can't really make an argument in a positive about the metaphysical or supernatural claims I'm making because you don't know. So this goes into epistemology, the classic, I don't know, I can't be certain. You want to press that on them.
I mean, it seems a little dishonest to me when someone says, I didn't say everything is natural, but when I ask them if they think anything is supernatural, they say, no, I can't think of anything. I mean, it's pretty dishonest.
Could you show me something supernatural? What's your example?
Can you show me something supernatural? So he flips the burden, right? He's not talking about showing you something supernatural, Mark. He's talking about your claims and your worldview.
Of anything. I mean, it's pretty dishonest.
Could you show me something supernatural? What's your example?
That's not the point. The point is you think everything that you could, like, literally anything you could imagine, you think is natural. But when I ask you if everything is natural, you're like, well, I don't know. Could you tell me if something?
Well, everything I'm aware of is natural. I've never seen anything.
So that's the dishonesty and quibbling over words I'm talking.
No. It's just
he's never seen anything supernatural. Has he seen thoughts? Has he seen imagination, concepts, causality, teleology, meaning, value, and purpose? Has he seen those things? Now he'll say, oh, I see meaning and value with the mother hugging the daughter. You're applying this concept to the mother and the daughter, things like love. You don't see these things. To say that you're looking at something and their evidence of the things themselves is a common mistake of the materialist. Alex wants to know how you account for the metaphysical, or what he's calling supernatural ideas, into your worldview. And you're not going to get out of it by saying, well, I don't know. If you don't know, why are you in a debate setting, arguing in the positive against God?
Just being very precise in my language, because while I don't think there is anything supernatural, I've never seen it, my position on that is provisional. As soon as I'm showed something supernatural or someone makes me aware of something supernatural, I'll believe.
That is why you go into the metaphysics he's smuggling in. He's already utilizing what he's calling supernatural. Alex did this to a degree, but he's not getting it. He's not going to see it, like literally, visually. But you have to show the unbeliever that he's assuming metaphysical or supernatural categories in his speech, in his process, in his worldview. It's exactly why we do this. To show them, so to speak, what they're already assuming and presupposing.
That something is supernatural, but not a moment beforehand. So me asking you then, like, what is it supernatural? Okay. You're just refusing to answer.
Is all water wet, Mark?
What do you mean?
Is all water wet?
I don't know. Probably, yeah.
Okay, so
wetness isn't a thing. It's
can you show me water that doesn't get you wet? It could be possible. So don't say all water is wet, Mark. If you don't want like those words, can all water get you wet?
I don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
Right, because when I say is everything natural, and you're like, well, there could be something that I'm completely unaware of that is supernatural and I don't know.
Yes.
Then you would also have to say that if I say, can all water get you wet? You would have to say no. Why? Well, because all water that I can think of can get you wet, but there could be some imagination of water that I don't know about that could not get you wet. That's the dishonesty I'm talking about.
So wetness isn't an actual thing. So you can wear hydrophobic material and then it won't get you wet.
Wetness is not an actual thing. So it's not a material object, right? So what are you talking about?
Understand. Are you okay?
Wild.
Because no, I'm saying
amazing.
I'm saying that I don't know of anything supernatural.
He's asking him if he's okay. I guess Alex is just laughing at him, so that's not the greatest approach. Anyway.
You're saying you do. When I ask about that, you go into this, is water wet?
Because I'm showing the dishonesty, and I think everybody can see that.
What do you mean? I mean, like, what you want me to say? I know for a fact there's nothing supernatural in the entire universe. That's what you want me to say. But
Wi-Fi.
I don't never.
Here's what's going on. You're
the argument, the idea of the unbelievers to say supernatural might exist, God might exist. Prove it to me. right? And this is why Alex needs to do a better job of the presuppositional position. He doesn't need to go in there and prove God. He needs to go in there and point out how Mark is assuming transcendental categories, how Mark is assuming metaphysics and immaterial ideas in his worldview. He's using these things repeatedly. That is the task for Alex. And he's done some of that, but he's allowed Mark to get him off topic many, many times. So this isn't the greatest presentation, but it is what it is.
You're trying to get him by you saying he's being dishonest, you're implying that he's being bad faith and not answering. He's answering with leaving room for error, right?
But you can be dishonest and not know it, Raging Tomato Woman. You can be suppressing truth and not knowing it, but naturally, by virtue of the idea suppressing the truth, you wouldn't know it. And self-deceived, someone can point out your dishonesty, and perhaps that's the reason to ridicule and mimic a little bit, although I wouldn't take that route myself. If you're locating where someone is self-deceived, it can become a very arduous task to navigate, because when you point out someone that's being dishonest and they know it's dishonesty, that's one thing. But when you're trying to point out that someone is being dishonest and they've deceived themselves, well, that's a task. Consider relationships you've been in with, like a woman who you think is self-deceived. If you've ever tried to go down that road, that's a scary place to be, because you're trying to prove to them something that they can't even see. So it's a very delicate process to do that. And I think what he's doing here is he's trying to do that, but he's taking a different approach, like a ridicule approach. And that's making Mark upset. And it's making Raging Tomato Woman kick in. Say, I don't think that's what he's doing. So this might be an example of how not to do that. But I guess they're an hour and 38 minutes in. So, they're just doing whatever comes to mind at this point. This is pretty choppy at this point.
That would actually make him be more honest. Like, just for instance, like, do you believe in aliens or whatever? And it's like, well, I mean, I've never seen one, but not to say they're not there. Right. He's leaving room for error. That's all he's doing. And that's what is keeping him honest and in good faith in the conversation.
But Alex, you need to refute this and say, keeping an open mind is not what this is about. You can call that good faith. Alex, you need to point out that he's smuggling in what you're calling supernatural, what you've tried to do, but it hasn't been as effective as you wanted it to be.
Conversation by admitting there may be a situation that he just hasn't come across or something that he doesn't know, right? I think that's all he's trying to imply. He's not trying to be an asshole.
I understand. I don't see it that way, but
yeah, I don't see it that way. Oh, okay. I'll take a break from this. Tog, I see there, null. Wi-Fi is B minus. Are you saying the connection listening to this is not coming through? Is that I don't know. Is that a personal issue from your end, or are you saying that the connection is bad? Because I can go back and try to listen to it for a second. You see, Noel, you critique these debates, and you have been for a while. But do you have an established position? You know, why don't you come in and tell us about that? Because I haven't heard an established position from you. And that's what I'm having some issues with some other people I'm dealing with now. They want to critique other people. A part of learning how to critique is challenging epistemology, epistemic justification, epistemic criteria of the person critiquing. You know, how do they know this is the case? What do they think is real? And of course, the ethic behind it. This is what most people miss. If you're coming from an ethical foundation that's subjective, well, all your critiquing, all your claims, well, they're validated by what? Your superior opinion? This is the thing about you, Noel. As a believer, I can't understand where you're coming from. I've talked to you a few times, and I think that you don't have an actual position. So while you're critiquing people, you know, I would just come back at you and say, how do you know that's the case? Why do you think you're right? Why ought I listen to you? Why ought we consider what you're critiquing? And I think that's where you're going to fall short. You know, we can talk about this sometime if you want to. So you've been critiquing a long time. And this is what he answers back. All three of Job's friends were rebuked by God, even Job. Okay, no. Ethics is what I want to get into with you, Noel. Because I think that's where you're going to flop. So maybe I'll just critique with you and then turn the critique into questioning the critiquer. And then we'll get to the bottom of this. But anywho, one guy came in, a new guy came in earlier, which was cool, a naturalist. But I know there's some deists out there, and there's definitely some materialists. So where are they? They don't want to talk to me. They don't want to answer my questions. I get it. It's fine. Maybe I'll just play some music for a while, take a break, and see if I'm going to come back and review the rest of that or review something else. We'll see.
yeah, just keep her in prayer.
Well, you're his son. Yes, indeed, he respects you. Yes, indeed, he sent his most.
Of course, jackass.
Why are you calling me a jackass?
Because you are a jackass. You are a self-righteous prick. And you come over here all the time to establish your own righteousness and belittle anybody who's on the
delay. Because I think on the iPad I keep getting over talking. Is this Dennis?
Hey, brother.
Hey.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
Well, I think I'm coming. I'm actually running a stream, and I saw you guys were critiquing this, so I popped over on the iPad. And usually when I'm on,
I don't think we've ever talked, have we?
Are we on
Is
your
there
channel?
a delay? Is there a delay?